I want to once again thank everybody for attending this conference, our national security seminar on digital assets. As part of our conversation today, even though I had to step out the room briefly, I want to share a conversation that I had with Colonel Sara Dudley on digital assets and national security and the role of digital assets in very surprising ways by our government. Our government is a very large entity and with lots of different perspectives and, frankly, lots of different purposes. And I think our audience will find this particularly interesting and suitable for that conversation as to the risks and the rewards and the trade-offs and the advantages and the disadvantages to crypto assets. And there's even a little bit of AI towards the end. Obviously, these thoughts and these conversations are her own and not those specifically of the Department of Defense, the Special Operations Command, or the U.S. Army. So sit back and enjoy this very brief conversation. And I really do hope that it adds to the larger conversation today. I am delighted to have with me Colonel Sara Dudley here from our nation's capital. Colonel Dudley, I see that you are in your car. Maybe you can explain to us and to the audience why you are in your car.
All right, so I'm in my car because I definitely didn't want to miss out on this opportunity to speak to you today. And I am unable to use my military account to get through to your podcast. And so I've been relegated to my car in the parking lot outside of the JFK Special Warfare Center and School down at Fort Liberty, North Carolina.
All right. Well. Thank you nonetheless for joining us, and for all the students as well who are watching. I know that they are extremely pleased to have you. So certainly. The topic that we're going to talk about is going to be on artificial intelligence and crypto and national security. When you think about, in particular, I guess we'll start with the older topic of crypto first, and then maybe moving into the artificial intelligence question. I mean, what for you are some of the national security questions? I mean, here. Both on this program, but also for the students and others watching this interview, there's a larger conversation about the place of the United States and the international economy, technology, how competitive are we, but also what are the risks? I mean, like from the standpoint of our military, I mean, how do you sort of judge those apples and oranges?
Right. So I would say I'll lead off with, why are you talking to an Army finance officer? Right. So I would say that because the Army is in its development of modernization and trying to keep pace with the technological advances around the world, I'm a finance officer. And so we primarily deal with the trifecta of resourcing, which is people, money, and things. And so the money side, the Army expends a lot of money just in its day-to-day business. And so obviously there's a demand for us to keep pace with the evolution of financing and value transfer systems around the world, because as a ground owning force, we need to be able to react and interact with populations anywhere around the world, as well as our partner nations, in the way that they would like to convert and or transmit finances, money or value amongst the world. So I have been involved with trying to keep us up to date on digital assets as a broader category, cryptocurrencies in particular, because obviously in national security, not only do we want to be able to transmit our funding in the most secure way possible to try to avoid funding the enemy, but we also help to contribute to the broader U.S. government in being able to detect and figure out the way our adversaries are spending money, obviously in ways at which they try to work in gaps and seams between what is solid, regulated, and traditional. So very important for the military, very important for the Army. That's
Th-
sort of
that
your tee up.
That is so cool. Surprising answer a little bit, from this law professor's standpoint, oh wow, that's, but also very logical when you say it. When it comes to sort of financing our partners and making sure that they are adequately resourced for their objectives, does this mean thinking about how value is transferred? Does this mean exploring new ways in which value is transferred? So not just, I guess it makes sense. I guess you're not necessarily just writing a paper check and putting it in the mail and sending it into a war zone. Does this mean sort of exploration of other digital rails, including digital assets? Maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, we want to, I think after 2 decades of the war on terror and seeing the ways at which elements that we partnered with had massive warp in their own underlying economic systems, the way that we were infusing US dollars into those areas, we want to cause the least harm possible. We want to transact in the way that they want to receive money and try to work within elements that they're comfortable with. So, as opposed to enforcing or imploring them to utilize our currency, while it does have value above which, their own currency or even digital assets might have in some cases, we want to have the option to be able to transmit to them in a way that they would like to receive support from the military that's in their footprint.
Really super interesting stuff. And I guess you're also, as you said, you're sort of getting information about, well, how adversaries may be doing that as well. And so maybe there's some learning by doing. I mean, maybe one or two insights that you can tell us without me having to worry about, later being assassinated.
Yeah, and so you just hit right on the money. Like, how can we help discern what's happening around us if we're not already in that environment, especially in all of the digital progression of cryptocurrency, stable coins, of NFTs,
NFTs, yeah.
of the new and emerging CBDCs. How are we do a lot of transfers with other governments, so we have to be in those environments to understand how to transact ourselves, but then also how to discern what's happening around us and or how our adversaries might be utilizing these for nefarious purposes against the national interests of the United States.
So I'll do a quick turn to, I guess, the latest and greatest issue of AI and generative AI. I mean, from a financial standpoint, from a finance officer's standpoint, I mean, are there any green, yellow, or red flags that kind of pop up, or that you personally find kind of interesting when you think about these developments?
Yeah, so AI, I think, is spectacular in what it can offer. I think that it helps reduce the cognitive load on a human being for things that can be very well defined. AI can help with that in all sorts of ways outside of just finance, but other military purposes. But in terms of the challenges, is because it decreases cognitive load, it increases exponentially the time at which we have to react to be able to either counter or discern what is happening in a financial transaction. So when computers are trading rapidly and or financial payments are being approved in a way that is automatic, that significantly decreases the amount of time we have to, as a sensing system of having Army elements around the world on the ground, like to be able to tell our partners that we're working with what is happening, right? So AI just, unless we could develop counter systems at which can alert us immediately to what they think what is happening, it's really a game of seconds in terms of being able to react and counter threat finance things in those financial spaces.
I guess I'll end, since we are in sort of video land, particularly for some of the audience, when you look forward and this idea of really being involved in these spaces in order to maintain our competitiveness and our national security, like, are there any sort of rules of thumb or ideas or experiences that you've found particularly valuable in terms of keeping ahead of the curve?
So I think it's like most other items with the Army trying to keep up with emerging technologies, and it's basically establishing those little nodes that are not bound by the traditional hierarchy and bureaucratic process that the military in particular is well known for. It's appreciated for in some things, but um, being able to have little nodes, and I think that's why I'm back at the Army Special Operations Command, where the Special Operations Forces are kind of those little generators of rapid fail, test, try for the big service so that we can figure out what's happening. But then ultimately, in this case, in the financial space, one, we want to do no harm with payments that are going out on our behalf of our government. But two, really making sure that we're still a valuable partner for our interagency organizations that really have the authorities to get into the space with near peers and peer adversaries, where the military is traditionally a kinetic option. That is not the space, the gray zone that we find ourselves in these days. And so we want to still be a very supporting partner to our other departments and agencies that are and do have authorities to be able to protect the United States in these venues.
Well, Colonel, we thank you for your service. This was also just a great and very interesting conversation, and we'll have to have you back to Georgetown as well to share your thoughts. Thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely.